everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and it's Tuesday, which means it's time to talk some Major League Soccer. Much has happened, much is still to happen. To talk it all out, I'm joined by Mr. Supporter Shield himself. It's Joe Lowry. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Philadelphia Union, congratulations on your accomplishment of winning the trophy that is best of an indicator, the best indicator, good talking for me, good start, that is the best indicator of long-term success in Major League Soccer. Congratulations, you've won the one that matters most.
Thank you, Joe, for that lovely introduction. That is indeed the one that matters most, unless you are most people. Mr. MLS Cup, driven by Continental, presented by Goodyear himself, Jeff Reuter. Jeff, are you a playoff guy or a Supporter Shield guy?
I am a playoff guy, and because
Attaboy.
Joe's a Shield guy, he didn't really care about how his sentences came out, but that's the reason that some Shield teams don't win MLS Cup. It's just those fine details that you need to execute like an answer like this off the cuff, and once you get those without those slips, that's when the Philadelphia Union can win MLS Cup at last.
Yeah, I prefer to lean back on my body of work. Many sentences, you're not going to get every sentence right, but over the larger sample size of sentences, which you get by talking as fast as I do on this show and every show, eventually your hit rate's going to be high enough that you're winning that points per game battle, your sentence per podcast battle, if you will, and that's sort of where I feel like I thrive, you know.
We don't have enough to talk about today, so I'm going to make this go even longer. Do you all have a consensus best Supporter Shield winning team that did not win MLS Cup? Reading about a team that we're going to talk about in more detail later, some of their supporters would argue one of their iterations, a.k.a. the Red Bulls, had a year in which maybe they were the best team ever, but then they didn't win MLS Cup. I'm wondering if you all would agree or disagree.
There have been some good ones. I would not go with the Red Bulls personally. I mean, Miami last year set the points record as the greatest regular season team of all time and then don't win MLS Cup. For some reason, that still doesn't feel right to me. The one I was going, Jeff, is to LAFC back when they set the points record under Bob Bradley.
Sure.
And they lose in the playoffs. They don't make it all the way to MLS Cup. That team was amazing and fell victim to the small sample size, high variance format of the postseason, which is great. Everybody loves that. It makes for compelling stories, compelling soccer. But that's where my mind went, Jeff.
I will go a little further back, but I'm not going to go too far back. 2014 Seattle Sounders, which was kind of like the pinnacle of Obadus, and this was where a lot of people's favorite kind of iteration where you have Dempsey and Martins, but you also have Chad Marshall, you also have Ozzie Alonso in his prime, you have Brad Evans, you have just a ton of talent there, and they end up losing in the conference finals to the LA Galaxy, who are able to pull off their third in 4 years, the final one of the Donovan and Keane era. So I think that team was one of the most exciting. That was also when I was pretty much 2014 was when I really started kind of focusing on the league at a national level, and then the next year is when I started covering the league. So there's also, maybe it's the last Shield race I was just able to enjoy as a pure on neutral, not trying to think about these things whatsoever. I'm not sure, but that 2014 Seattle jersey, those Rave Green jerseys have never looked better than that year.
Joe, with Jeff pointing out it's the last one he really enjoyed. Have you enjoyed this Union Supporter Shield win? Has it been an enjoyable campaign for them, for you?
Very much so, not just for the Union, but the Shield race in general this year has been awesome. Last year, it wasn't quite so good at the very, very end, but we did have the Columbus-Miami thing, will they, won't they? And this year, Philly have been, I think, a really compelling story, right? I mean, that from a narrative perspective, Philadelphia, I think, have provided in that we spent a lot of time on this show talking about Jim Curtin and his time at Philadelphia, a long-suffering servent of that organization, working as... Yeah, go
Do you want your credit? Should I give you your flowers for a moment?
We've already
you
done
got
it. I don't want I get uncomfortable with praise, so let's move this thing along.
All I'll say is I was like, how do you let Jim Curtin go? And Joe, I believe, was like, I see the logic. I think it makes sense. I think they'll be okay. And here we are. Turns out Joe's smart.
Well, and I think things can be two things, right? Where Jim Curtin seems like an affable guy. I've never spoken to him myself, but seems like a guy that basically everybody outside of Ernst Tanner, I guess, likes a whole lot. And it seems like when he wants it, we'll have another job waiting for him in Major League Soccer. But Ernst Tanner talked with me earlier this year for a back-heel piece and basically was like, yeah, it was time, right? It was time to go in a new direction. We felt like things were stale. And Ernst Tanner said to me that, last year we were basically prone to playing a boring possession style. And that's not what he wanted. He wanted to be more aggressive. Now, it's a little bit of hyperbole from Tanner. It's not like they were keeping the ball like the Crew or anything like that last year. But they had deviated a little bit from how he wanted to play, Ernst Tanner. So he makes the change and makes it very clear by hiring Bradley Carnell, someone that he wanted, by the way, to put on Jim Curtin's staff as an assistant coach previously. He hires Bradley Carnell, and Carnell is the facilitator. He is the mouth in a lot of ways, and not to totally discredit Carnell at all, because it does take real work to be the manager. but the style is coming from Tanner. Like Tanner is pulling the things and making things happen. And Carnell is the one that is facilitating those things, not necessarily coming up with wholly unique tactical planning. And Tanner goes out and hires him. And this year, I went and looked at all the numbers. This year, Philadelphia are playing the fewest passes in MLS in their own third of the field. AKA, they're not spending time in that part of the field. They are controlling the field position. They push opponents high up the field for them, deep down the field for the opposition. They don't spend a lot of time in their own third. It's been very, very, very aggressive in that part of the field. And they also force opponents into playing the most vertical passes in Major League Soccer. Not most in terms of volume, most in terms of average vertical distance. So that means that they're up in your grill. Because if I'm pressing Jeff hard, Jeff, in all likelihood, is going to have to play the ball long upfield. And so that's going to inflate his teams.
Easily.
Yeah, I mean, everybody does, unless you're Darlington Nagbe, who also, congratulations on a great career. But for the Union, they are aggressive. They're pressing. They're playing Tanner ball. And when you marry that style, which is giving the players clarity on the field, because that's what style's about, right? It's about giving players clarity so they can make quick decisions. You want to be unified. There is no one style that wins you soccer games. You just need to be cohesive in how you play. The Union are that. And on top of all that stuff, I've been talking for forever, but they've also identified a ton of high-quality players from a bunch of different places, not just from their academy, although that is the best academy in America, in the United States. They are checking so many boxes. I will end with this stat, which blew my mind. If we're doing the whole, Ernst Tanner was kind of right thing. Not in how he handled the current situation. I completely think he was in the wrong there. But in the decision itself. The Union have finished lower than 6th in the Shield race, not in the Eastern Conference, in the Shield race, one time since Ernst Tanner was hired. Lower than 6th. That is insane. Ernst Tanner comes on board in this club. They have only finished lower than 6th in the Shield race once. It was last year. They missed the playoffs the first time in that period. Jim Curtin is let go somewhat unceremoniously, and now they're back on top of the MLS mountain. This is the second Shield they've won under Curtin. They were under Tanner, They were barely inches away from getting that third one. That would have been back in 2022. The Union are like a model MLS club, man. It's crazy how good they are.
Jeff, do you want to give any flowers, since we're giving out flowers today, to Philly for their Supporter Shield win?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's also some fun to watch about a group of players who, yes, has been modified, but has said, hey, I think we can do more than people saw from us last year. So let's go do that. And there have been some key departures this year too, right? Like Jack Elliott is playing a more important role in Chicago right now than he was, for example. Not a departure per se, but Quinn Sullivan's injury obviously changes the attack.
Jack McGlynn.
Forward, Daniel Gazdag leaves, Jack McGlynn leaves, right? And so there's something that's really impressive about how quickly this has come together. And I think that that's a testament to Cardinal's ability to get a locker room behind him. And we saw that in St. Louis, but I think we talk about it this year, but we can just broaden this to the last decade of MLS. Pretty much since the Galaxy Sounders kind of fell off as the 1-2 in MLS, the West has been a lot squirrelier for 10 years running for the most part. So to see Cardinal have this sort of success in the Eastern Conference should give confidence in his ability as a coach. And I think that it is something that will sort of back his... I know that the narrative has been getting back against St. Louis. Don't forget that he was the guy who kept the New York Red Bulls playoff streak alive on an interim basis and then was shoved out the door right before the postseason. I can't imagine how that would feel to be doing such good work throughout the entire regular season and then be, shown the door right before. And so there is sort of a point to prove at that point. And then you come back, you're able to do it. You're able to do it in the year the Red Bulls snapped the playoff streak, by the way. I don't know if that's going to register on his radar whatsoever because he's such a positive, optimistic sort of guy, but I mean, that's a little bit of poetic justice in its own way to have a coach that you let go from the family then win the Shield in the year that you can't even make the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, look, I still have a couple of quibbles about how Philly runs this thing in general, and they haven't won MLS Cup yet. I think that that's going to be the big one for them next. Of course they know that, but they are very well on their way at this point, and I think that they are a worthy... people were asking questions in 2020 about their Shield just because of the COVID year and all that. There should be no questions that they are the best team in MLS this regular season this year.
Then there will be no more questions, Jeff. Instead, there will be questions about other teams, Joe. Vancouver get Ryan Gauld back. Yeah. We've got Rossi and Zawadzki returning for Columbus. Feels like positive signs for them, even if they don't end up winning the Supporter Shield. The Crew not really in that race for a good long while here. Of those three names, Joe, which one do you think has the most potential for impact in the playoffs? Gauld, Rossi, or Zawadzki? Zawadzki?
This should feel wrong. I mean, Zawadzki, to his credit, the guy came back, played 90 in the middle of the back three for Columbus in their 1-1 draw with Orlando on Saturday. he is super important to how the Crew play, where they have had this defensive kind of collapse this year, where they've been even easier to pick off in transition than they've ever been under Wilfried Nancy. So Zawadzki is important. I'm going to go to Vancouver, though, and go to Ryan Gauld, which is maybe foolish because he's the one of those three players who can't start. Right now, he's not fit enough. He's only made 2 appearances back since we last had this show.
23 minutes, baby!
Yeah, so he comes off the bench in the Canadian Championship. Again, off the bench, and Vancouver win that. Congrats to them. They win it every year. And then Vancouver smashed San Jose 4-1 on Sunday, and Gauld comes off the bench and has his first minutes with Thomas Muller because those two had sort of been ships in the night due to injury rehab and Muller arriving in the summer. Gauld can't start and probably won't start at least until the postseason, maybe not even then. But the reason why I pick him is because I don't know that the Crew make it through the gauntlet of Eastern Conference teams. And so I do think Zawadzki and Rossi are really important to them, and they're able to play more minutes now. And the Crew, by the way, they're not a team I'm overlooking. Like, they're in the pack in the Eastern Conference. I think very little separates them even now, missing Wissam Abou Ali and Mo Farsi and Rudy Camacho. I don't think much separates this version of the Crew, even the slightly banged up one, from the Union, a team that we're talking glowingly about. I think they are a very, very good team, Columbus even still. But I would back Vancouver to make a deeper run, which will give Gauld more time to go and to come back into the team. The dude was back to his old tricks in that game against San Jose, man. He's on the field for 3 minutes, and he's tracking back into his own half to win the ball. Like, I mean, this guy is exactly what Vancouver have taken so much time and effort to brand him to be, which is the working class MVP. That's the whole campaign they had for him a couple years back, to be the MVP of Major League Soccer. It didn't work because he's not quite at that level. But he's so good. He's so good and so helpful defensively for this team. He's got a ready-made spot back in Jesper Sorensen's system in that right half space when he wants it, when he's fit enough to take it. So for both teams, huge victories. Not results-wise for Columbus, but huge victories in terms of fitness to get Rossi and Zawadzki back. I didn't think it was going to happen this soon. That is like maybe life-giving to Columbus. Still, they've got a tough road ahead of them. But for Vancouver and Gauld, I back them to make a little bit of a deeper run in the postseason.
And Joe, while we're spreading positivity to a few different clubs, let's spend some time with San Diego. An incredible expansion season. Really, I think the only knock I have on them, and it's a pretty big knock, is that they didn't make a play for Matt Turner, thus not giving me my very specific prediction point from the season preview. Other than that, a pretty strong season so far for San Diego.
It's Taylor. That's a tough one. I think you would have needed to train Matt Turner personally to learn how to pass the rock before San Diego would have gone out there and made that move. It was still one of my favorite VSPs, maybe my favorite one.
I feel like at that point Matt Turner would have said whatever he had to say. So even if I did train him, even if he espoused a passionate enthusiasm for passing, I'm not sure I would have believed him versus please don't make me stay in England anymore.
He would have had to do the go watch all my tape. Like it's there. Like it's in there. Like gaslight you into thinking that all the tape actually has been this amazing Adairson-like distribution. And then you're like, well, I'm not going to go look it up. That's rude.
We just
must be right.
Superimpose his face on Adairson's face. Like this is totally me the whole time. I don't know what people are talking about.
I have those tattoos. Stop asking those questions. It's really personal. For San Diego, they set the expansion record as the all-time best regular season expansion team with their win over Houston. It was a 4-2 win. It was a very San Diego win in that they had a ton of the ball. It was a little chaotic because they lost the ball at times and gave Houston some nice attacking looks. But really their attack and their ability to go and possess the ball high up the field and even to build and create those pseudo-transition attacks from deeper areas, they're just so good at that stuff, man. It doesn't matter who's in the lineup. Chucky Lozano comes off at halftime just because in this game, and it's Amal Pellegrino that's on that left side, and all of a sudden they're still just as good as they were before. Kind of feels like it's plug and play for San Diego. Not only did San Diego break the points record as the best regular season expansion team of all time, 60 points for them, past LAFC's 57 back from 2017, but they also set the expansion points per game record that the Chicago Fire way back in 1998 had at 1.75 points per game. San Diego have now officially set their floor for points per game higher than 1.75. They can't get lower than 1.76. That's a lot of numbers to say that even throughout eras of Major League Soccer where the schedule used to be shorter, 30, 32 games, now it's 34. San Diego, whether it's points per game, however you want to look at this thing, they have been the best that we've ever seen. Now, they still got some trophies to win, a trophy that they want to win. I still think they can do it. Man, they need to be a little tighter on the ball than they were against Houston, but the talent of this team and the way they play is unique and absolutely good enough to go out there and win MLS Cup.
My question was going to be what stops them, Joe. Can you explain what you mean by tighter on the ball?
Yeah, in this game, and Jeff, I don't know if you saw this game at all. For me, there were too many moments, both from Manu Dua, who was playing at center back, and Chris McVeigh, who was playing center back in this game, where they just give the ball in a bad spot in their own half, and they're possessing as the deepest players, of course, in San Diego's shape. and they cough it up to Houston, and Houston are racing right at them. And those are difficult situations for any team to defend. You bake some of those giveaways into like your tactical planning, right? You know that you're not going to be perfect on the ball because your center backs are Manu Dua and Chris McVeigh, right? I mean, like that's part of the calculus for San Diego. I think Tyler Heaps has talked about this, where it's kind of a hard thing to wrap your head around that we have our lowest paid players have the ball more than anybody else on our team, and they have to be the ones to go and get the ball to our highest paid players. That's like a hard thing to pitch to an owner's room when they're like asking about how you're spending their money. So you have to accept some of that along the way. But if San Diego keep control of the ball and don't cough it up in bad spots, they're as good as anybody in this league. And even when they do give the ball away, they've still got a puncher's chance in a lot of these games. So they got to be a little bit sharper and a little less sloppy in possession deep in their own half. If that happens, they can beat anybody in this league.
I will say this game was a bit of a red flag for me, actually, about San Diego's playoff efficacy, because the Houston Dynamo were playing to avoid elimination from the playoffs, and they failed at that, which means they'll be part of segment 3 of this episode. Congratulations to the Houston Dynamo on making it into our graveyard of eliminated teams. But keep in mind, in the 84th minute, this game is 1-1. Yep. And then the game goes entirely off the skis, and San Diego scores, Houston answers, San Diego scores twice, including a goal in the 13th minute of second half stoppage time. But it was like a great celebration from Pellegrino, and it was just like a great moment of just like, yep, and they've clinched it. And I wish every game had one of those we put it on ice moments instead of just letting it kind of dwindle to a 1. It's emphatic, it's American, it's whatever. But when you look at the numbers, San Diego did their possession thing, 65% of the ball. That's what they do. They were outshot 17-16, and they had fewer XG as well. So these weren't just like, hopeless Houston Dynamo shots. It's just that the Houston Dynamo can't convert good shots very well. And so against a team that is better in the final third, against a team that has better attacking power than Ponce and Linger and Dwayne Holmes as their shooting options, and you get into the Sun Heung-mins and Denny Bowangas, and you get into any of these other teams, I think that they still are a high volatility team, and that's where you get back to, again, that defense. If they don't have that calmness and confidence once they can pluck the ball off the feet to be able to keep it and move it forward, that will help them a lot, because they also have a goalkeeper who can struggle when tested too hard and when he has to see too much of the ball. So I won't be surprised if presses try to concentrate on getting the ball to CJ Dos Santos once you get into the playoffs. Just trying to start to project a little bit. I'm with you, Joe. I see a path. I definitely see a path where this team makes MLS Cup at a minimum. But I also see a path where maybe this could be another... I think they're less likely to lose than St. Louis was. But I also suppose that matters who gets out of the play-in wildcard game before we can project.
We are going long, as we tend to do. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about a few more games from this past weekend, and then we'll take a look at Sporting Kansas City's newest hire. Back soon. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show, everybody. Before we talk Sporting Kansas City's newest hire in David Lee, let's talk about the Cascadia Derby, or one of the Cascadia Derbies. We've got Seattle with the win over Portland. Jeff, this used to be like a fun, exciting, enjoyable experience, these two teams playing. I feel like we used to get criticized for only coming back in to talk about like El Tráfico or Sounders versus Portland. That's not really an allegation we're fighting these days, because it doesn't seem like one that we spend a ton of time discussing.
No, and it's a trend that's actually been really playing out over the last half decade plus, where Seattle-Portland has just become like one of the cagiest games that you'll find any year. And part of it is, I think, actual animosity. The quotes come out every single year. Schmetzer saying, they call themselves Soccer City USA. I think we've done it better. Portland kind of throwing their own sort of we won it first, which is correct and true. So like they have the animosity. They have the obvious, this is a game that they circle. And I think that they were glad this wasn't on decision day this year, although it was very much up against it. But generally, this is a game where the XG difference is less than half a goal, right? And you look at this latest installment of it, and it was 0.6 advantage. Seattle wins 1-0. And even though Portland didn't, this is where we get into some concerns about Portland's attack, like when they signed Christoph Felda. Like if you remember, Joe, we were accused of hating fun.
Yeah. When really we were just having fun. Frankly,
this was the shots.
We were the fun havers.
I was going to say
distance conversation.
Yeah. And I would say that our vision is much more fun than what the Portland Timbers put out. Joe, keep going.
I was just going to say, I mean, I was never taking a stance on Velda as a player. The dude's been quite good, actually. The real problem since he showed up is that David Acosta doesn't look like he's much more than a average starting MLS player. So yes, Portland have their attacking flaws. I think they're much more DaCosta related and Phil Neville related than they are Velda related. Anyway, continue, Jeff.
No, I do agree with you. I think that they are Neville related, and that's where you start to look at how they're constructing the attack, and that's where you see that they don't really have the clear, unless DaCosta is pulling the strings. And this, again, all of this only makes Evander look more impressive over time, which is so funny. It's like a reverse Patrick Ewing theory. But you have a very slow progression of the ball. You have uncertainty about what to do when you get to the final third. You have a team that's still getting a lot of ball recoveries, so they're trying to get the ball. They got 60% of loose balls in that game against Seattle, but they still generated like less than 0.6 XG. I think it was 0.7, something like that per Opta. And then they do get one clear look, and this is what will happen if Felipe Mora skies it. And that's where you go back to, it wasn't that Velda seemed like he wasn't going to be an MLS caliber player. Of course he was. The issue was that they needed a sure thing so bad in that attack, because without Evander, they didn't have that sort of game breaker who you were confident could wrestle away a point or 3 from a game like this one against Seattle. And if they'd had that player, I think that Seattle played in a way that left that door far too wide open to someone that they don't want to let in, especially their rival at home, and yet Portland still just was not in a position to capitalize that. So that's a question about squad build. That's a question about tactics. But for Seattle, again, it's another one of those where it's like you can look and say good teams have to win the ugly games 1-0, especially when they know the opponent has something to prove. On the other hand, it doesn't look like they're going to get out of neutral really before we get to the playoffs, and I'm just wondering if it's going to come a bit too soon for them. And again, if that Leagues Cup and the nature of that Leagues Cup final is going to hamper their ability to recover. I'm not sure.
Are they a team that would be better served not making the playoffs, as counterintuitive as that sounds? Because making the playoffs, especially in this format, to me is there is something wrong. We need to rebuild. We need to reevaluate things. Versus making the playoffs is we made the playoffs. It was a good enough season, and then anyone can win on any given day. That's all it takes. I do think it makes it harder to change things that might need to be changed if you are in that playoff spot.
Yeah.
I mean, how much did that affect Atlanta's season? Maybe that's a part that we didn't even talk about with their 50 postmortems that we put out this year, is that when you beat Lionel Messi's Miami in a playoff series, yeah, you probably feel like we've got most of what we need. We just need a different voice in the touchline and maybe $40 million of attacking talent that doesn't always look like they want to play together. It's that easy. And yeah, I'm not sure, but I agree with you. I think that for Portland, especially when you look at it, maybe it is a case where you need to do bigger reflection, and that comes easier if you're outside the postseason. But I don't know. It seems like they've been wanting to run this thing back. At least I've not gotten any sort of senses from the outside that this looks like a project that is being actively assessed for its viability. Maybe I'm wrong.
Joe, Portland Timbers to win it all? Yeah?
Nope.
All right. Asked and answered. Thank you, Joe. One more team to talk about from the weekend, Jeff. Orlando City, their third draw in 4 games. Still in playoff spots. Still looking okay. Still a positive goal difference. It's all good in Orlando? High pitch voice?
Yeah.
Question mark?
Yeah, it's a deserved high-pitched voice question mark, because I think now you're starting to see this is why Orlando didn't break through into that top 4 when there was so much changing, and Columbus was ceding space in the Eastern Conference from what we expected ahead of the season. And Martin Ojeda has had a phenomenal season, right? I think I called him out as someone who could be a good outbound transfer candidate. He's been one of the most prolific, I think the 5th most goals and assists in MLS this year, something like that. I heard it on Apple TV. It can't be wrong. Around the 65th minute, he has a 2-on-1 with Patrick Schulte running alongside Duncan Maguire, who I don't think most people would accuse of being as nimble of a mover, but when he is off the ball, he is going to create headaches for a lot of people. His movement was good. He was going into the right position for kind of a far post tap in. And instead, Ojeda kind of waits the extra second and then sends it into that no man's land between Schulte and Maguire, and it just goes out of the bounds for the goal kick. And that's where I kind of wonder about the ruthlessness, because a couple minutes earlier, Ojeda had the ball, and Freeman was very upset about it as well. So you're starting to see some of that body language of you're making the wrong decision. I don't trust what you're doing with this. Why didn't you look my way, right? And that's going to happen if you're not scoring goals, because every player on a soccer field feels like they could have scored a goal, and if you can't, then you're probably not. You shouldn't be starting in a high-level league like that if you don't think you could have. But I don't know who their match winner is as constructed, because I think that they have a lot of guys who are very good in facilitation. And I think that for his flaws as a player, and there were several, I think that Facundo Torres wanted to be that figure more than some of these guys seem to want to. When you look at like Luis Muriel and you look at Pasalic and you look at the guys that I mentioned earlier, all of them, I'm just not sure, unless Ty Spicer's coming off the bench and suddenly saying this is my team now, which ain't going to happen yet. I think that this could be like just their regeneration year. And if that's the case, if this is sort of where we go from the last phase of the project, helmed by Torres, to whatever's coming next, whether that player is on the roster or is going to be signed, I think that this has been a good turnover year for them. We'll see how competitive they can be in the playoffs, though, when they have to try to decide these, because unlike other leagues where you would look and say, like, okay, they're good at not losing games, therefore they should be good for a cup run, you do need to win games in MLS, right? Like the tiebreaker is MLS, or is wins in MLS, so like not goal difference. So these teams are calibrating for those sorts of fine margins, and if you're not good at that, other teams might be better.
Speaking of teams that haven't been great, let's talk Sporting Kansas City, shall we? 0 wins in their last 5, 0 draws in their last 5, but reasons for optimism? We have a chief soccer officer in place, or I should say a president of soccer operations and general manager. David Lee hired former sporting director at NYCFC. Joe, opening thoughts on this one? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs middling? Thumbs questioning because we don't know a ton?
I mean, thumbs definitely questioning. Thumbs are always questioning, Taylor. These thumbs are like on the beat, asking questions left and right. The 5 W's, man, toss an H in there. Like, they're out there.
You just never know.
Yeah, you never know. You really never know. So they're questioning, but they are definitely more tilted up than they are tilted down. So Lee arrives, as you said, from NYCFC, where he had been their CSO for the last 6 years. It is difficult to know, and here's the question for Lee, just right out of the gates. It's difficult to know from the outside how much of NYCFC's success, where they were very successful during his time there, they won an MLS Cup, they were consistently one of the best teams in the East, stemmed from Lee's roster building nous, and how much stemmed from advantages that you get being a part of City Football Group, the biggest and most affluent multi-club ownership group on the planet. It's hard to know because I've never spoken to David Lee. There's like there are not a lot of open windows into the CFG process. But I will say, if you want to look around Major League Soccer, there's another current CSO in MLS at a very successful team who spent time in North America as part of CFG, and that's Khalid El-Ahmad up in Jeff's neck of the woods. Like, he was working for CFG, was a part of that machine, has come out and has done a fantastic job, truly, in Minnesota, where they have become one of the teams that I think you look to when it comes to time to rebuild for your club. So we have some evidence, granted that's a light one, but some evidence that coming out of CFG can prepare you for success as a CSO of a team in MLS. The guy, David Lee, undoubtedly has a giant book of contacts that are going to be really helpful. He's got plenty of experience in a pretty well-oiled recruiting machine. If I was a Sporting Kansas City fan, I would be pleased with this hire. Is it a slam dunk home run? No. I don't know that really exists in MLS unless you go and get like one of the 3 or 4. Right, yeah, Mesut Ozil's barber, like a children's fiction author, like whoever, right? Outside of that tier, or maybe also like the Thorringtons and like Kuntzes and a few of these other guys, Tanner and like that top tier, right? Unless you go and get one of those guys, maybe you don't know regardless of whether you're going to hit. But I would, like I said, I would be pleased for my top line thoughts. I think this is a good hire from SKC.
The positive interpretation, not that it is needed spin or interpretation,
Sure,
but a lot of the kind of positive comments I've seen from SKC supporters have been about the kind of idea that if you are looking at his time in New York, the most like critical New York NYCFC supporters have basically been like, he's focused too much on bargain hunting, not enough on the marquee deals that would be difference makers, that, you know, with all this cachet you have with being in New York, you could go out and get more influential players, more names that would generate more enthusiasm. And so if the criticism is then a guy who's spending a lot of time bargain hunting and has a maybe smaller market mentality, that feels like a pretty solid appointment for SKC, who, like it or not, are going to be a smaller market than New York. I know I'm breaking new ground with that one, Jeff. But I think that's the positive interpretation I have seen on that appointment.
Yeah, and I think that if people are going to treat it as a negative, I think that you would look and say that sort of, how much money are they moving? How much are they in the market? How much are they spending? Has much more to do with ownership than it has to do with a CSO, right? Like, that is going to be purely what funds are made available. And from people I've spoken with who have been part of CFG, they did notice a shift late in the 2010s as Man City was obviously the first in the CFG hierarchy, but Girona really became the second one, and they elevated once they got promoted into La Liga and were competing for the Europa League or the Conference League pretty much every single year at a point. MLS looks a little bit less of a thing to push, right? And I think that they were seeing that right now, until they get that stadium, they weren't going to make the inroads into New York City as a brand maybe that they wanted to. And so there's like, okay, so we're focusing elsewhere. They still had some very good moves. They still had some incredibly good signings, and they've had really good help from like Tati Castellanos and several others. That's like the crown jewel, I think you would say, of the last 6 years or so for NYCFC. I think when you look at it from a Kansas City perspective, though, like, yeah, you do want someone who's going to see shifting out of the multi-club model as being the relief, so that if the budget isn't quite Atlanta United blank checkbook, just go sign it. I hope that you know who you're signing, because I'm not even going to check if they're good at soccer or can play together. If you're not going to be that opulent, then instead, if you flip it around and say this person has won MLS Cup with a model that we used to enjoy, right? Like, because that was Kansas City. They were the model club. They were the club that when Portland came into MLS, when Minnesota came into MLS, when Orlando came into MLS, that they were being cited as like, this is the small market. This is the one that's just, it's like everything we said about Swansea 10, 15 years ago before that became like a really laughable idea. We'll see how he's able to turn this over, because he has a lot of work to do when you look at that Kansas City squad. So if it is a matter of you can only make 2 or 3 of these sort of like mid-tier, it might take a couple of years to get the squad back up to a contending MLS standard. But generally, I like the appointment. It's someone who knows the league. It's someone who also has, has had success in the league as well, and someone who I think will have a point to prove, much in the same way that, like, you know, in a very different sort of arena like Carnell did when he left Red Bull, of sort of like, no, because usually with these multi-clubs, it's like either you keep getting promoted until you're Pep Guardiola or whatever, or they're going to let you go and they're going to hope someone comes in for you so your career can advance, because there's only so much advancement within the group. And so I think for him, this is advancement.
I think I totally agree, Jeff. I think there is like an element of freedom of now getting more control if you're David Lee. I mean, he was handed a 7-year contract, which is crazy in professional sports.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's a long deal. I'm certain he got a pay raise. He also got a title bump, which matters maybe.
He got a pay raise, and then I think also tax is significantly less in wherever he will be living.
And
New York.
Houses are significantly cheaper.
Right, yeah, cost of living makes that race look even nicer. So there are like a lot of reasons, security and stability, all those things, all those synonyms that I just want to rattle through. That all works for David Lee. I do think that he views this as an opportunity to go and show the soccer world like what he can do with the project. That is his. Like, he is the architect now of whatever this next version of Sporting Kansas City looks like. He's going to hire the next coach. He's going to build out the club, where they have one scout right now, if memory serves, at Sporting Kansas City. They don't really have a data department, certainly not one that's fleshed out whatsoever. They need to go and hire people. Like, forget players. They need to do that too. They need to go out and hire like adult, smart soccer people to go and staff the club, because it's just a husk where a staff should be at the moment. So every decision that Sporting Kansas City makes in one way or another is going to be traced back to David Lee. And I think that's attractive. Like, you want to be in a position where you get real credit, obvious credit for success. Now, granted, there's some blowback if things don't go well, but the floor is also, Sporting Kansas City are at their floor right now. It cannot get worse. They're the worst team in MLS by a country mile this year. And DC United and CF Montreal exist. They're so bad, Sporting Kansas City. There is nowhere to go, literally nowhere to go, but up for this team. So it's obvious that he's going to make them better. I do think it's interesting how appealing this job seems to be. Right, we talked about it from Lee's perspective of, okay, you can see now he leaves the CFG group and he has a little bit more autonomy, he has more control. I understand that. I can say with certainty that he was not the only like really quite impressive candidate who had legitimate interest and was in the interview process for this job. There were folks in MLS who I think would impress people who were at least casually kind of interested in this. There were people coming from respected European clubs, like really respected ones, who were interested in this job. So that tells me something about how people seem to perceive all of the flexibility that Kansas City have right now. Also maybe tells me that ownership is willing to spend across the organization in a way that they maybe never have before, at a time where it feels like we are on the precipice of real change in MLS, whether it's calendar, roster rules, whatever it is. We're going to see a lot of changes in Sporting Kansas City, not just with the roster, not just with the club, maybe with the spending too, as MLS seems to change around. So I'd be really optimistic across the board right now if I was an SKC fan.
I have it on good authority that he was the only one who gave the correct answer from a Kansas City perspective, too. What is your ideal type of barbecue? A lot of vinegar, a lot of tomato bases being thrown in as options, and I think that ruled out some candidates right away.
Yeah, 100%.
So, credit to David Lee, who Google also would like me to know when I Googled length of David Lee's contract. Asked if I was referring to his 2-year deal with the San Antonio Spurs or his 6-year deal with the Golden State Warriors.
Of course,
it was the Warriors
extraordinaire,
deal.
David Lee.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Also a baseball player with a minor league contract. So could be any of those. Does this leave NYCFC in a weaker position, a more vulnerable position, very briefly, for either of you?
This has to be expected. Like, I think pure and simple, again, if you're CFG, if you don't have them on a promotion track to get them up to the top jobs, like, you're kind of waiting and understanding that this sort of movement will happen, I'd imagine. So I would guess that they will have a succession plan in mind. They will have their candidate. Either it's going to be a top person who's been working as a scout who wants to move into the sporting side of things. Maybe it's going to be somebody who gets elevated from that sort of like a director of player personnel or the technical director, usually one of those like second in command sort of roles, and gets promoted into that. I could see that as well. Maybe their data recruitment has spotted someone who's maybe being underappreciated, who either just left an MLS club or is still on a club staff but easily pliable, right? Whatever the case may be. I think that this is part of the process of working as a multi-club model, and I would imagine that they're more likely to have a succession plan for David Lee than Kansas City was to have one for Peter Vermees. I'll put it that way.
All right, let's take one more break. We'll come back. We'll talk about some teams in the playoff graveyard and what comes next for them. Congratulations to SKC. Hopefully, bigger and better things next season. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. Joe, you excited to talk Red Bulls? How enthusiastic are you to talk about a Red Bulls team that won't be in the playoffs? Be honest. And also, what did they do to make you dislike them so much?
I am grateful as someone who watches a lot of Major League Soccer. I am grateful when certain teams are not in the postseason because I've seen enough, man. Like, I've seen enough. There's not a lot more that we need to talk about. And I don't think this Red Bull section is going to be very long, frankly. I'm thankful that I am done watching the Red Bulls play soccer, bar decision day at this stage. Like, we've done it enough this year. Let's go ahead and pack this one in, fellas, and we'll come back next year. I don't have anything against the Red Bulls. I very much enjoyed, Jeff talked about his 2014 Sounders, where he was sort of coming into watching the league more at that time. The Red Bulls being really good in the late 2010s is like sort of my entry point into watching a lot of Major League Soccer. So I have good memories of the Red Bulls, far more good than bad. It has frustrated me to no end how they've operated in 2025. Like, that has been... It's been absurd to watch, and we've talked about it a bunch this year, that they spend 2 transfer windows, not 1, but 2, chasing the ghost of Timo Werner, and flop in both windows and leave that third DP spot open all season long is crazy to me. NYCFC, who I slammed for doing the same thing, and there's a David Lee tie in there somewhere maybe, or maybe that's a CFG directive. Again, it's hard to say. David Lee had Santi Rodriguez leave NYCFC for big money to South America. They didn't replace him with a number 10, and I slammed NYCFC for doing the same thing. At least in the summer window, when they had a chance to go out there and finally sign a player, they did that, and they signed Nico Fernandez. Yeah, they listened to me. They never would have figured it out on their own, right? They needed some schmuck to come tell them that they should fill that DP spot.
Yeah,
I guess the Red Bulls,
New York season.
The Red Bulls weren't listening. I don't know what the takeaway is there, but the Red Bulls just didn't do it, man. And in between that. That puts a harder ceiling, a lower ceiling on their roster, and the fact that most of their players just aren't very good. It's been a bad year. Like, the Red Bulls are a fine team. They're like almost a bang average team, a little below average. They're not the worst. They're certainly not the best. But they're not good enough to make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, and 60% of the Eastern Conference makes the playoffs. So when the Red Bulls have missed on as many of their international signings as they had, Wiki Carmona played starting minutes for them this season. He is not a good MLS player.
I think he was found out a couple years ago too, which makes it even worse. Yeah,
it's name after name. It's their homegrown players who are like, I think Peter Stroud and Daniel Edelman are useful MLS players, no doubt. Do you want them eating up the lion's share of the minutes into a double pivot for a team that you expect to be really good? I sure don't. Like, it's that over and over again across this roster, and it's so frustrating because the Red Bulls are clearly a team that just aren't cared about whatsoever by their football group. And they're just languishing. Like, they are just languishing in the Eastern Conference, and it's sad to watch, frankly.
Do either of you have a position on when the rot started to set in for the Red Bulls? Has this been a long time coming? Is it a more recent development? I believe some supporters would point to the rift that forms between Jesse Marsch and Ali Curtis, and then Chris Armas being involved after Jesse Marsch leaves as being kind of the moment when the power struggle shifts and maybe doesn't recover.
That moment actually was the one that first came to mind, but they did win a Shield after that, right? So like, and they made it to MLS Cup last year, I suppose. But I think that's
by the way,
when
neither finalist in the playoffs. Kind of weird.
Yeah. I think we can write off that MLS Cup run. By the way, I think this season has given us enough evidence for that.
I think once Miami and Columbus lost in the first round, we knew it was going to be a squirrely Eastern Conference no matter what. But yeah, I think you started to see more discord, and I think also keep in mind like Mike Petke getting forced out, right, and Ali Curtis. So I think that there was generally in that 3-year stretch, there was that sort of frustration, and there was that sort of sense that not all was charming and rosy and everything, and everyone had a different idea of how to maximize the Thierry Henry window, and everyone had a different idea of how to get out of that window, right? And I think that you really start to see it more late 2010s, because that's when the expansion push really ramps up, and that's when Atlanta comes in and is immediately competitive. That's when Nashville becomes more of the thorn in the side team that can just kind of nick points under Gary Smith in that first year, 2020. The Revs sort of regenerate under Bruce Arena, and the rest of the East is starting to make these major changes, and the New York Red Bulls were just slow to react. It was like the first time that they didn't really seem to have a counterpoint, because even when Marsh was there and even after Alec Curtis was gone, they were still fortifying the roster with talent from within the league. They were bringing in Aaron Long. They were bringing in Sasha Kleshtin. They were bringing in, keeping Dax McCarty until Tyler Adams was ready. And then they just kind of stopped doing all of that work. All of that sort of proactive work that you expect from a club that expects to contend at the highest levels every single year. And instead we're looking at, okay, well, how do we nickel and dime this? Who is the free agent, 30-something-year-old European who we can maybe have come in and do some minutes this year, even though it's a very short-term solution for a team that needs a long-term trajectory. It has been going for just under a decade. They've had some really good coaches help kind of bridge that gap for some time, but this was the year it just really caught up with them, how slow they have been to evolve compared to the rest of Major League Soccer's Eastern Conference.
Very much so. They've been left behind in the East, and they've been left behind in Major League Soccer. Like this club was at one point a model club where they had a clear style of play. That's evaporated, where now they play like your average soccer team. They don't press that high. They don't sit that deep. They don't possess the ball that much, but they don't possess it that little. They've lost their tactical edge, like whatever that amounted to. And that's fine. Like, you don't have to have a tactical specification if your players are really good. And their players aren't really good. Like, Choupo-Moting's been a good signing for them. Credit to them for that. Absolutely. Forsberg's been good this year as well. He was not that great last year, missed a chunk of the year. He's been good this year. But really, when you look at this roster, Julian de Guzman, who's their sporting director, Jochen Schneider, who's their head of sport who oversees Guzman, the roster they built is entirely unimpressive. Like, I am completely unmoved by the New York Red Bulls roster, which you cannot afford when you've allowed your manager and Sandro Schwartz just to evaporate your style of play. So everything is a miss right now for the Red Bulls. Basically, everything is a miss for them. Now, they're still churning out some promising players from their academy, which is a darn good thing. That's maybe their only saving grace right now. But their DPs are old and not players that you can really build on or depend on in the future. They haven't shown an ability to go out and really nail DPs who are in their prime since a decade, basically. I mean, let's look at the list, right? In the last decade of DP signings. So let's start at 2016. You've got Sasha in there, I think, as a DP in 2016. Good player. Legit players in here that I've never heard of. Omar Damari, I don't know who that is, legitimately. I'm on Wikipedia right now, so apologies if this is wrong. But they do a good job of listening to these players. Kaku, kicked the ball at a fan. Josh Sims, Drew Yearwood, Patrick Kamala, Luquinhas, Dante Vanzier. Oh, that's a run of 5 DPs right there. Guys who are listed as DPs on their roster. And then you get Emil Forsberg. You get Emil Forsberg, Felipe Carballo, and Choupo-Moting. So it gets better at the end. But my word, that is atrocious. Like, this team is like, they're a joke. In a lot of ways, they're a joke. And it is so frustrating what's been allowed to happen there. There should be heat being felt all across that organization. And we shouldn't let Red Bull Global kind of escape that either, because they've clearly just neglected them along the way.
Which organization should have more heat on them but doesn't? The Red Bulls or Houston? Because it doesn't seem like there's a ton of heat on anybody at Houston. Maybe a little bit on Ben Olsen, and even there it feels like supporters are willing to extend him some courtesy given the departures in the offseason, but also given that no one above him seems like they're trying to be particularly aspirational. Maybe that's me editorializing incorrectly. I leave it to you.
No, I think that's entirely fair. I think that the Red Bulls will feel harder done because, one, they had a streak to uphold, and they blew it. And so I think that there is something where this failure failure will hit harder than Houston, which up until 2 years ago was always a team that was eliminated before the 33rd game of the season. So actually the fact they were still in contention this late to scale is better than a lot of what we saw from the Dynamo. One other note on Red Bulls quick, condolences to Carlos Coronel, who had a fantastic year in goal, was one of the top 2 or 3 shot stoppers in the league. Probably won't win goalkeeper of the year though, because his team missed the playoffs. So I would imagine at that point, it's rare that you see someone win an individual award on a team that misses the playoffs. But when you look at Houston right now, again, we talked about the game, right? They lost 2-4. They kept it really close, and then they didn't have what they needed to be able to get a result at home, right? And that's been the story of the season so far. They've changed their game model a lot. We knew that they would when they let their 2 best players, who both were central midfielders, go. I think it was inevitable that their possession model was going to change radically without Hector Herrera and Coco Cascadia. But you look, and they trade off 8% of possession, but they also, it's in the final third too. It's not just one of those things where it's okay, they couldn't keep the ball as well, and so then teams had more time to beat them, right? They averaged fewer shots per game. They averaged a worse chance per game. They had more what you call big chances, but that's because they had more counterattacks. They weren't really a counterattacking team when you have 60% of the ball with Hector Herrera pulling the strings, right? So they just had more of those opportunities. They just weren't built to convert them as constructed. And so I think this year, look, they knew it was going to be a rebuilding year because the replacement for Ache was Jack McGlynn, who is much younger and hasn't been given that sort of you're the focal point of a team trust before, like Herrera had at points of his career where he at least knew what to do. So I think that they could be better for it next year. But when you look at the top signings that they're making, designated players, and Joe, maybe you're better equipped to talk about this one, I think, actually. But they just really haven't hit in a way, much like you talked about with the Red Bulls. Just they haven't made enough of those impact signings that are going to contend when you look at the rest of the West.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I'm not surprised that the Dynamo have been eliminated from qualifying for the playoffs, right? I mean, it's not a shock that would happen because they have worse players than they did in the last 2 seasons when they did make the playoffs. So Ben Olsen comes in ahead of the 2023 season. They have a good year. They make the playoffs. Same thing happens in 2024. It looks like there's a real tactical foundation that's being built that Jeff talked about. There's some good players in that team, especially Herrera and Carrasquilla. Those guys are gone. So instead of Ache next to Artur in the double pivot, it's been either Brooklyn Reigns, fine young player at the U20 World Cup, not Hector Herrera, or Junior Urso, who's a useful rotation player in MLS. Originally, according to Pat Onstead, who's the CSO of this team, it was supposed to be Jack McGlynn, who was the Ache replacement. But then Carrasquilla left, and so they needed to push McGlynn higher up into the right half space, which is kind of a red flag to me, because it seems like you maybe didn't know exactly how you wanted to iterate on this squad. And McGlynn's been really good. I think he's a better player than Carrasquilla, so props to them for that. But it's not just the midfield that they've struggled to iterate on. It's center back, where Mikhail was a huge part of this team in the middle of their back line. And he was a late offseason move to Palmeiras because they came in with the bag, and so you say yes in that situation. And Pat Onsted's talked about this publicly on the record, kind of accepting the blame that, hey, we were a little late to recognize that was going to be a risk. We didn't think that was going to happen. We thought he was going to Europe. South America comes in late in the window where they still have open windows, and we weren't ready. And I respect the guy absolutely for owning that. It's still real, and it still happened. And so that center back spot has been a huge problem for them all year long. It really takes them until the summer window when they go out and get Antonio Carlos, who's kind of done this MLS thing before, but is also not in the prime of his career. That's kind of their solution. Then you look in goal, where Jonathan Bond was and still is the worst shot stopper in Major League Soccer. I don't know how your models.
Metric,
yeah, I don't know how. Metric. I don't know how in an injury crisis you end up going out to sign Jonathan Bond. Truly, I do not. I understand and have sympathy for the fact that Houston lost their starting goalkeeper and then their backup goalkeeper at the very beginning of the season. It's a tough hand of cards to be dealt. You can play the cards a bit better than that. You can play the cards a bit better than signing Ezequiel Ponce as your DP last year, when everything is so clear that you need a chance creator. And then the chance creator you sign eventually, after more than a year of languishing and clearly needing that player in the final third, is Andrzej Linger. Great name. Is their third highest paid player. They're still not spending a lot on him in general, so it's not like he's Alexei Maranchuk or anything like that. But he's kind of been playing like Alexei Maranchuk. He does not look like a difference maker in MLS. And so the clear sign in MLS of a really good team and a successful club is one that, like Philly, can iterate from one version of the club to the next, right? That can refresh the roster on the fly. The Dynamo aren't doing that. They haven't done that. And I do think, I tossed out Guzman and Schneider for the Red Bulls. Pat Onstad, more than Olsen, I think, should probably be feeling some heat. This is not personal whatsoever for any of these people. I'm sure they're lovely. I don't think you can look at what Houston have done and think, yeah, the sporting department there is operating at a level of most of their peers in MLS.
All right. So how do we think it improves for Houston? Or do we think it improves next season? Or do we feel like this is a team that, once again, struggles and is maybe on the playoff bubble but ends up missing out?
Yeah, I think that it won't surprise me if we spend a couple more years of them being somewhere between 6 and 11 or 12 in the West, right? And just there's so little separating those teams, and it sounds like such a dramatic either you're the 6th best team or the 12th, but like really it's like 7 points every year, 2 results, 3 results. It's going to be really interesting to see where they want to take this thing. And I know that their majority owner, Ted Sagal, at first had been also like the front of the Houston Dash. And so there was sort of some split focus. There was how can we get personnel to work in both sides of the operation, so to speak. And that has been better separated. We're at this point now, I think there could be more concentration on each group. The Dash have been a little bit better this year than they were in the previous season as well. But when you look at the Dynamo, the question is going to be ultimately, how do they keep stride with the teams around them? And that has always been the question. And I think they now have the recent enough validation that their fans will show up and create good atmospheres when the team deserves that, right? And before there's that question of like, is Houston going to make inroads in that market with how empty that stadium was? And then it turns out, yeah, it's actually the quality of play. Who knew teams would rather watch, or fans would rather pay to watch good soccer players and good teams playing soccer than bad ones every year? Who knew? So
Who knew?
They at least know what they're going for. Again, they've had success under Ben Olsen, so they can kind of ride it out and figure out, is he the guy into next year? I have no issue with Ben Olsen coming back to start the year at all. I think he's earned that sort of grace for what this year was because, like Joe said, the squad that he had this year. But they need to have, again, improve your chance creation. Probably won't be Jack McGlynn as your chief facilitator in the final third. He's someone who can help get you there, and he's someone who can be a good auxiliary late runner sort of guy. He can do some Sebastian Berhalter stuff, for example, but maybe even at a higher level, I would say, if it's all right around him. And then just get a better striker, right? Like, I think that if you had this group of players with Albert Elise, like, it flies a lot better, and that is still a profile player I think they could reasonably bring in.
Yeah.
So we'll see if they can identify who that player is, but I think that there's enough of a squad here where they can at least avoid dropping further next season.
Yeah, I actually don't think they need a striker so much. I think Ponce is a like mostly okay MLS player. That's at least not where I would focus. I think they need a 10. I think they need another winger or like another dangerous wide attacker. I think they probably need a center back and maybe a center mid. They've got a lot of roster flexibility. So if they're willing to go out there and get into the market and get in and do the dirty work to find those players, and most importantly, if they hit on those guys, they have the flexibility to do it. They have the DP spots to do it. They have guys coming off the books in the TAM range. So they'll have opportunities. But if things continue sort of in the status quo, I don't know that we've got a lot of evidence that screams, yeah, Houston are going to nail enough of those guys to be a real threat next year.
Well, there we have it, gentlemen. Nicely done, nicely discussed, nicely reviewed. Joe Lowry, Houston Dynamo Joe, thank you very much for your name today and also your analysis of all things MLS.
Thank you, Taylor.
Jeff Reuter, no known middle name, thank you for your insights and observations as well.
Thank you.
Listeners, thank you all very much for continuing to listen and support the show. We greatly appreciate it, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.